There is a moment in life when something quietly breaks inside you. Nothing dramatic happens, no betrayal, no big conflict, no obvious turning point. On the outside, everything continues exactly the same. You still go to work, you still answer messages, you still sit through family dinners and laugh at the right moments. But internally, something has shifted. Being around people suddenly feels heavier than it used to. Conversations that once felt normal start sounding repetitive and shallow. Certain laughs feel forced. Small gestures of kindness begin to look less innocent. You start noticing the things behind them: expectation, interest, calculation. And the strangest part is that nobody else seems to notice this change, only you. Everyone around you continues acting as if nothing has changed, but once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The automatic sympathy you once felt toward people begins to fade, not because someone betrayed you, not because of one traumatic experience, but because you started paying attention. It usually begins with small things. A coworker praises you when others are listening, but quietly criticizes your work when you are not there. A friend disappears when life becomes difficult, then suddenly reappears when they need help. Conversations that seem friendly on the surface slowly reveal their real structure: status, comparison, approval. Most people are not talking to understand each other, they're talking to position themselves. At first, these moments feel isolated. You tell yourself you might be overthinking, but the longer you watch, the more the same pattern repeats again and again. Eventually, a realization begins to settle in. Much of human interaction runs on self-interest, not affection. And once that realization enters your mind, it rarely leaves. For many people, this moment marks the quiet end of social innocence. When we are younger, we carry a very comforting belief about humanity. We assume most people are fundamentally good. We assume kindness is natural, that friendship is sincere, that empathy is the default setting of the human mind. But time does something uncomfortable. Time reveals patterns. And once the mind begins recognizing patterns, your view of people starts changing whether you want it to or not. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer understood this long ago. He believed selfishness is not an occasional flaw in human beings, it is their default setting. Every person, first and foremost, lives inside the limits of their own interest. Even sympathy often has a hidden motive. It preserves relationships, reputation, or personal comfort. Decades later, the philosopher Emil Cioran pushed this idea even further. According to him, the more deeply you understand human nature, the harder it becomes to admire it. Not because people are monsters, but because they are rarely as noble as they pretend to be. Then another thinker adds an even darker observation. José Ortega y Gasset described what he called the mass man, a person who moves through life without ever examining their own thinking, someone who repeats opinions, habits, and emotional reactions absorbed from the surrounding crowd. Most people do not think as much as they believe they do. They echo. When you place these perspectives next to each other, an uncomfortable possibility appears. Maybe the problem is not that certain people eventually disappoint you. Maybe the problem is that for a long time, you believed in a version of humanity that was simply too optimistic. This video is not about hating people. It is not an argument for isolation or bitterness. What we are exploring is something quieter and far more personal. The moment when intellectual maturity begins to dismantle the illusion most of us carry about human nature. Because there is a certain point in life when observation becomes dangerous. Once you start watching people closely, something changes in the way you see them. At first, social life seems simple. Words appear to match intentions. People seem transparent. But eventually, another layer becomes visible. Imagine a simple family dinner. Someone at the table shares an achievement they are proud of. Everyone listens for a moment. Then something subtle happens. A small joke appears that slightly diminishes the accomplishment. Someone quickly changes the subject. A quiet silence spreads across the table. It is not open hostility. Nothing obvious happens. But once you learn to notice these small fractures, they start appearing everywhere. In offices, among friends, in casual conversations that once seemed harmless. And slowly, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Many people are not interested in you as a person. They're interested in what your presence does for them. Status, validation, comparison. Schopenhauer captured this reality with brutal simplicity. He wrote that every person takes the limits of their own perspective as the limits of the world. Each individual lives trapped inside their own point of view, interpreting everything through personal interests, personal fears, and personal needs. This is not necessarily cruelty, it is structure. The human mind was not designed to see the world objectively. It was designed to survive inside it. And psychological survival often means prioritizing yourself without even realizing it. Modern psychology confirms this through something called the egocentric bias. People consistently believe they are more fair, more generous, and more reasonable than they actually are. Everyone thinks they're the exception. Almost nobody is. The result appears constantly in everyday life. The friend who only calls when they need something, the colleague who praises you publicly but quietly criticizes you when your success threatens theirs, the conversation where someone asks how you are doing but is clearly waiting for the moment when they can start talking about themselves again. Most of these behaviors are not carefully planned. The people doing them usually believe they are good people. That's what makes the pattern so persistent. Schopenhauer once wrote that the more closely you observe human behavior, the more you realize how many actions grow out of selfish impulses disguised as good intentions. This does not mean people are monsters. The truth is more uncomfortable than that. Most people are simply too absorbed in themselves to see others clearly. For a long time, this reality stays invisible because the mind protects certain social illusions. Those illusions make life easier. They make relationships feel stable. They allow us to trust people without constantly analyzing their motives. But eventually, those illusions start collapsing. Small inconsistencies repeat too often to ignore. And this leads to the hardest realization of all. The real shock is not discovering that some people are selfish. The real shock is realizing how common it is. Once that understanding settles in, something changes in the way you relate to others. You may not become hostile, but you begin to create distance, not out of hatred, out of clarity.
Most people believe the world is full of opinions. It is not. It is full of echoes. Look around and you will notice something uncomfortable. People rarely think as much as they believe they do. Most opinions were borrowed 5 minutes earlier from somewhere else, a headline, a comment section, a trending post. Someone says something with confidence, and suddenly hundreds repeat it as if it were their own thought. The Spanish philosopher José Ortega y Gasset noticed this long before the internet existed. He called it the rise of the mass man. Not a person defined by poverty or lack of education, but by a particular mental attitude. The mass man demands nothing from himself. He does not examine the ideas in his own mind. He simply adopts the ideas that already surround him. Thinking requires effort. Repeating requires nothing. That is why repeating is so popular. When you adopt ready-made opinions, you receive two powerful psychological rewards immediately: safety and approval. If the crowd believes something, you can believe it too, and nobody will question you. You belong, and belonging is far more comfortable than thinking. Once you begin noticing this pattern, it becomes impossible to ignore. Entire conversations unfold where nobody is actually thinking. People recycle arguments they heard somewhere else. They defend positions they never examined. They get angry about things they barely understand. The goal is not truth. The goal is alignment. People want to make sure they stand on the correct side of the crowd. And that's why outrage spreads so quickly. Anger requires no thinking. It only requires participation. A rumor appears and thousands react instantly. Someone becomes the villain of the week. Context disappears. Facts arrive later, if they arrive at all. By the time the truth appears, the damage has already been done and the crowd has moved on to its next target. Ortega understood this dynamic perfectly. He wrote that the mass man does not want to be right, he wants to impose his opinion. Those are two completely different motivations. Someone who wants to be right must question themselves, examine evidence, and remain open to being wrong. Someone who wants to impose his opinion only needs a crowd behind them, and crowds are easy to find when emotions run high. Once you see this clearly, something changes in the way conversations feel. What once looked like dialogue begins to look like performance. People are not exchanging ideas, they are signaling loyalty. They are demonstrating that they belong to a particular tribe of opinion. The conversation itself becomes secondary. The real purpose is social positioning. Real dialogue requires something rare: attention and independent thought. Without those two things, conversation becomes noise. Most discussions are simply people waiting for their turn to speak. They are not listening to understand, they are listening to respond. The moment a pause appears, they jump back into their own story, their own argument, their own perspective. And because everyone is doing the same thing, nobody actually hears anyone else. This is why so many conversations leave you feeling strangely empty. Words were exchanged, but nothing real happened. No understanding increased, no insight appeared, just noise. At first, this realization creates frustration. You start noticing how many discussions go in circles, how many arguments repeat the same patterns again and again. But eventually, the frustration fades and something else replaces it. Distance. Not because you suddenly hate people, but because your expectations quietly collapse. You stop expecting depth from conversations that were never meant to have it. You stop expecting reflection from minds that rarely practice it. And this is where intellectual maturity becomes dangerous, because once disappointment stops being emotional and becomes analytical, something fundamental shifts in the way you see human behavior. The Romanian philosopher Emil Cioran explored this moment with brutal honesty. He wrote a sentence many people find disturbing: "To know human beings is to begin despising them." That line sounds cruel, but Cioran was not calling for hatred. He was describing the psychological effect that prolonged observation of human behavior can produce. The more you watch people over time, the more certain patterns repeat. Principles suddenly disappear when they become inconvenient. Loyalty lasts only as long as it is comfortable. Convictions change when social pressure becomes too strong. People often speak about morality with confidence, but act according to convenience when the cost of doing the right thing becomes real. History offers endless examples of this contradiction. Wars started for prestige and pride. Systems of corruption maintained for decades by people who appear respectable in everyday life. Entire institutions that publicly defend virtue while privately protecting their own power. None of this requires evil individuals. It only requires something very common in human nature: the constant tension between cooperation and competition. Humans evolved in environments where both were necessary. Cooperation helped groups survive. Competition determined who received status, resources, and influence inside the group. Generosity and calculation grew together, and they still operate today. Cioran understood what this does to the mind of someone who pays close attention. The more clearly you see this tension, the less spontaneous your trust becomes. You begin to observe motives more carefully. Empathy becomes more cautious. Not because you have become cruel, but because certain illusions have stopped working. The moment those illusions collapse, something else appears in their place: a quiet, mental distance. And once that distance appears, it rarely disappears.
There is a dangerous point in intellectual maturity where disappointment stops being emotional and becomes structural. At that point, you stop expecting much from people, not because you are bitter, but because you have seen the pattern too many times. The Romanian philosopher Emil Cioran captured this moment with brutal honesty. He once wrote that to know human beings is to begin despising them. That sentence sounds cruel at first, but it is not a call for hatred. It is a description of what prolonged observation can do to the human mind. When you watch people long enough, certain patterns become difficult to ignore. Principles that sound solid in conversation suddenly disappear when they become inconvenient. Loyalty survives only while it is comfortable. Convictions change the moment social pressure becomes stronger than personal integrity. Many people speak confidently about morality, fairness, and compassion, but when acting on those values requires sacrifice, the tone changes quickly. History makes this painfully obvious. Wars started over pride and prestige, entire populations convinced to hate strangers they had never met. Systems of corruption lasting for decades, while respectable individuals quietly benefit from them. None of these things require extraordinary evil. They only require something deeply human: the constant tension between cooperation and self-interest. Evolutionary biology explains this tension clearly. Human beings evolved in environments where cooperation helped groups survive, but competition determined who gained status, resources, and influence within those groups. Cooperation and rivalry grew side by side. Generosity and calculation developed together. The same species capable of deep empathy is also capable of quiet self-preservation when personal advantage is at stake. Cioran understood what this reality does to a person who begins to see it clearly. The more aware you become of these contradictions, the harder it becomes to maintain automatic trust in people. Your sympathy becomes more cautious, your expectations become smaller. And this is where something interesting begins to happen. The social world around you slowly changes shape, not because other people changed, but because your perception did. Many conversations that once seemed meaningful now feel empty. Certain friendships lose their depth once you realize how much of them depended on convenience. Situations that once felt natural begin to feel performative. You begin noticing how much of everyday social behavior revolves around status, validation, and subtle competition for recognition. And gradually, another shift takes place. Your social circle becomes smaller. At first, this can feel like loss, but over time, it starts to feel like clarity. Arthur Schopenhauer noticed this long before modern psychology studied it. He believed that frequent social interaction often produces more noise than understanding. The more people surround you, the more expectations, comparisons, and small tensions accumulate. That is why he famously observed that solitude is the destiny of all exceptional minds. This sentence is often misunderstood. Schopenhauer was not recommending total isolation. What he described was something more subtle, a form of psychological distance that protects clarity. When you understand human nature more deeply, constant social exposure becomes exhausting, not because you hate people, but because you recognize how many interactions revolve around superficial dynamics, status comparisons, polite pretenses, conversations that never move beyond surface-level exchanges. The mind that values clarity begins to choose its environments more carefully. Some conversations stop feeling necessary. Certain gatherings quietly disappear from your calendar. Not because you feel superior, but because your attention becomes more selective. And modern psychology has quietly confirmed this philosophical observation. Studies on well-being repeatedly show that happiness does not correlate strongly with the number of social connections a person has. What matters far more is depth. A few stable and genuine relationships consistently produce greater emotional balance than dozens of superficial contacts. One honest friendship often outweighs an entire network of casual acquaintances. Schopenhauer understood this balance intuitively. The real wisdom in social life is not learning to like everyone, it is learning to reduce the illusions you project on them. When you stop expecting extraordinary virtue from ordinary people, something surprising happens. The constant disappointment begins to fade. Reality stops feeling like a betrayal because you no longer demand from it what it was never designed to provide. And when that unrealistic expectation disappears, something else becomes visible. Among thousands of ordinary interactions, there are occasional moments that feel different. A friend who remains loyal even when there is no advantage in doing so. A quiet act of help that nobody announces publicly. Someone who keeps their word even when breaking it would have been easier. These moments are rare, but their rarity is precisely what gives them value. Social psychology confirms something human experience has always suggested. Deep trust between individuals is statistically uncommon, yet those rare relationships carry a disproportionate influence over well-being and psychological stability. The presence of even one or two reliable people in a life can completely change the emotional landscape of that life. This leads to a final realization. Intellectual maturity does not destroy your view of humanity, it reorganizes it. Most people are ordinary. Some will inevitably disappoint you. A very few will prove unexpectedly sincere. And it is precisely because they are so few that they become so important. In the end, the real mistake was never liking people. The real mistake was assuming everyone deserved the same level of trust and closeness. Once that illusion disappears, something calmer replaces it. A quieter relationship with the world. You stop searching for perfection in human nature. You simply learn to recognize the few moments when it rises above itself. There is a quiet consequence when certain illusions disappear. The world does not necessarily become darker. In many ways, it becomes clearer. For a long time, many people walk through life with an expectation they rarely question. They expect others to be consistently understanding, loyal, fair, and thoughtful. When reality fails to match this expectation, frustration appears. People feel betrayed, disappointed, even angry. But the real problem was not the behavior of others. The problem was the expectation placed on them. Once that expectation begins to dissolve, something unexpected happens. Much of the frustration disappears with it. Arthur Schopenhauer hinted at this long ago when he suggested that wisdom in social life comes from lowering our illusions about human nature. The less we idealize people, the less we are shocked by their behavior. Instead of experiencing constant disappointment, we begin seeing human behavior for what it actually is: imperfect, inconsistent, and deeply influenced by self-interest. This shift does not require cynicism, it simply requires clarity. And clarity often produces a strange form of freedom. When you stop expecting extraordinary virtue from most people, their ordinary behavior stops feeling like betrayal. Their limitations become easier to accept because you are no longer pretending they are something else. Ortega y Gasset adds another layer to this understanding. His analysis of the mass mentality shows that most people do not navigate life through deep reflection. They operate through habits, social imitation, and inherited opinions. This is not necessarily malicious, it is simply easier. Reflection requires effort and discomfort. Most individuals prefer psychological stability over intellectual examination. Once you understand this, something changes in the way you interpret other people's actions. You stop assuming everyone is carefully thinking about their choices. In many cases, they are simply reacting, repeating, or following the path of least resistance. Emil Cioran pushes the conclusion even further. He suggests that disillusionment is not a failure of thought, but a stage within it. Certain illusions must collapse before a more sober understanding of life becomes possible. When idealized images of humanity disappear, something more realistic appears in their place. People stop looking like heroes or villains and start looking like what they actually are: complex, contradictory, and limited. At first, this realization can feel isolating. The world may seem colder than it once did, but over time, something more balanced begins to emerge. When you no longer expect perfection from people, you become capable of noticing something rare: genuine integrity. Among thousands of ordinary interactions, there are occasional moments that stand apart. Someone keeps their word even when there is nothing to gain from it. A friend remains loyal even when convenience suggests leaving. A quiet act of generosity appears without the need for recognition or applause. These moments are easy to overlook when you expect them constantly, but when you understand how rare they actually are, their significance becomes clearer. A single, honest relationship can outweigh dozens of superficial connections. Social psychology confirms what philosophy long suspected. Emotional well-being does not depend on the number of people around you. It depends on the depth and reliability of a very small number of relationships. Most social interactions will always remain ordinary. A few will become meaningful, and a tiny number will become essential. This is where maturity quietly reorganizes your social world. The circle of people around you becomes smaller but more defined. Attention shifts away from quantity and toward quality. You stop investing emotional energy into relationships built on convenience or social performance. Instead, you begin valuing the rare individuals who demonstrate consistency, honesty, and quiet loyalty over time. This does not mean you stop interacting with the broader world. It simply means you stop confusing proximity with closeness. Most people will pass through your life without much impact. A few will shape it in ways that remain for decades. Understanding this distinction changes how you move through social life. You become more selective with your time and attention, not out of arrogance, but out of recognition. Because in the end, the real mistake was never liking people. The real mistake was assuming that everyone deserved the same place in your life. Once that illusion disappears, something calmer replaces it. You stop searching for perfect people. You start recognizing rare ones. And sometimes that quiet shift in perception is the closest thing maturity has to wisdom. If you made it this far, you have probably already felt the shift this video talks about. The moment when the world around you starts looking slightly different. The same people are still there. The same conversations still happen. Nothing on the surface has changed, and yet something underneath it all feels exposed. Once certain illusions about human nature disappear, they rarely return. You begin to notice patterns where before you only saw personalities, motivations where before you only saw kindness,
Small calculations hidden inside ordinary interactions. At first, it can feel uncomfortable. Then it becomes familiar, and eventually it becomes impossible to ignore. But the strange thing is that the world itself has not changed at all. People are behaving the same way they always did. The only thing that changed was your ability to see it. And once that ability appears, it tends to stay with you, quietly observing, quietly noticing, even in moments that seem completely normal. A laugh that lasts half a second too long. A compliment that carries something slightly off beneath it. A conversation where someone listens just long enough to bring the attention back to themselves. Small details, almost invisible, until they are not. And after a while, you start realizing something else. Most people will go through their entire lives without ever noticing any of this. They will continue believing the same comfortable stories about human nature. They will move through the same patterns without questioning them. In a strange way, that might even be easier, because once you start seeing certain things clearly, it becomes very difficult to return to the old way of looking at people. The illusion does not rebuild itself. The mind simply learns too much. And that leaves you with a quiet question that most people never have to ask themselves. Was the illusion protecting you, or was it hiding something you were always meant to see?